Tonight we start with a story that could be straight out of a Hollywood thriller. It's the story of a woman called Maria Butina. She's an enthusiastic gun rights activist, a Washington University graduate, and now a convicted spy who tried to influence American presidential elections.
To determine if this was, and there was no conflict of interest.
By talking with her.
Well,
By talking with her and the parties.
And you concluded?
That she knew what she was doing and that she was extremely satisfied with her lawyers. She was extremely satisfied with her lawyers.
And therefore, her plea is?
Voluntary.
The development comes at a time when Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating Russia's role in the 2016 American presidential election and whether Donald Trump's campaign conspired with Moscow to help him win. Though this investigation is not looking into the case currently, Maria Butina becomes the first Russian citizen to be convicted of working to shape the American policy in the period spanning the 2016 election campaign. Kremlin, as can be expected, has rejected these allegations as groundless.
Все обвинения в ее адрес мы считаем абсолютно необоснованными, несостоятельными. Вот. Все остальное это уже вопрос судебного разбирательства в США и вопрос защиты Бутина, который на данной стадии мы не хотим комментировать.
So who is this woman? Who is Maria Butina and what are the charges against her? She sprung on the scene 9 years ago as a furniture retailer. She was only 21 years old then. She then joined advertising and started gun advocacy. She got involved in Russian President Putin's political party before landing in the US on a student visa. She continued campaigning for gun rights and aimed at a powerful lobbying group in Washington. That's the National Rifle Association, the NRA. Her calculation was simple. Butina predicted that a certain political party will win the US presidential election. She trained her guns on this group that was closest to it, the NRA. Months before Donald Trump announced his presidential campaign in America, Maria Butina began developing ties with the Republicans. Her scheme was financed by a man called Alexander Torshin, an ally of none other than Russian President Vladimir Putin. By her own admission, Butina tried to establish unofficial lines of communication with the high and mighty of American politics. And for what purpose? To benefit the Russian Federation. Reports say her boyfriend, Paul Erickson, was in contact with a senior official on the Trump campaign. Butina traveled to Republican conferences, she hosted friendship dinners and boasted of her influence at the White House. But as the Russian meddling probe intensified, she was caught in the investigators' net. So let's get reviews from both sides on what has happened here. Joining us from Russia is Dmitry Babich. He's a political analyst with the Russian international news agency Sputnik. Good evening, Dmitry. Do you agree with the charges against Maria Butina that she tried to influence American foreign policy, and is there enough to substantiate this?
Well, I don't think that you can influence U.S. foreign policy by befriending lower rank activists of the Republican Party and of the National Rifle Association. National Rifle Association, or NRA, is very influential in the United States, but it is only concentrated on the problem of gun rights. It has nothing to do with foreign policy, with military establishment, with arms that are used in combat operations. So I think the case against Putin was absolutely made up because she did not behave like a spy. She posted her photos with NRA activists on Facebook. She communicated with Russia through emails which were not protected, which were easily read by FBI agents. So she didn't behave like a spy. But of course, after 6 months of solitary confinement, one is ready to admit anything just to get out of jail. So I think the United States simply broke her. She admitted to conspiracy against the United States. Based on what? Based on her meetings with NRA activists. That just sounds Stalinist to me.
Why do you think she pleaded guilty? You're saying that the United States broke her, but if she was indeed a spy, and I would like to believe that American agencies or agencies in any country will not press such serious charges against an individual just because she was Russian. Do you think that is what she's being punished for? Why did she take the guilty plea now?
Well, anyone doesn't want to go to jail for 15 years. And if there was a real trial with the jury, which consists of average Americans influenced by the American media, taken into account the anti-Russia hysteria, which is now reigning in the United States, she could get 15 years. Now, under the plea bargain, she could face up to 1.5 years in prison, which is also terrible. But of course, it's better than 15 years. So I think the story is very clear. They put her in solitary confinement. They kept her there for 6 months. And they simply pressured her to make this guilty plea in order not to face 15 years more.
Dmitry Babich, thanks very much. I'm told that you have to leave. With us is also Stephen Golub, who tracks international affairs very, very closely and is joining us from the US this evening. Stephen, what's your take on what has happened here? Do you believe that these were trumped-up charges?
No, she was an unregistered foreign agent. The word spy is being thrown around, perhaps accurately, perhaps, however, maybe a little bit too strongly. I think to understand this story, we have to place it in context that the National Rifle Association does have great contacts with the Trump administration as the U.S.'s most powerful lobbying group and has a track record to prove it. And there have been these questionable Russian efforts to cultivate the NRA in all sorts of ways. And the NRA has responded in a very favorable manner, including really treating this person Torshin like a dignitary as in the same way that they would treat someone who had given them tremendous amounts of money. And there are questions that the U.S. Congress is now starting to look into, or will be starting to look into next month, regarding whether money went from Russia to the National Rifle Association and in turn to the Trump campaign, which would be an illegal foreign contribution. And to put that in more context, that illegal foreign contribution to a U.S. campaign would be an influence buying effort that is not permitted under U.S. law, and that is part of the broader picture of Russia trying to influence U.S. democracy in various illegal ways.
I'm afraid, Stephen, you're talking in generalities. You're talking about a pattern. You're talking about assumptions. This is how the NRA behaves. This is how they're close to the Republicans. This is how people infiltrate. We're talking about a specific case here. This woman, who, as Dmitry said, was contacting her Russian peers or friends on emails which weren't protected, who was posting pictures on social media, who was kept in solitary confinement for 6 months, did not have a lot of options. She did not behave like a typical spy, and the American state, as Dmitry says, broke her, which is why she pleaded guilty.
Well, but she pleaded guilty because she was doing something that obviously was illegal, acting as a foreign agency, as a foreign agent, representing the interests of a foreign government without registering with the U.S. government. So that's pretty clear and straightforward. That's not a generality at all.
All right, how do you believe this is going to influence the Russia probe, though these two cases are being treated separately and Robert Mueller is not investigating this particular one, but she becomes then the first Russian citizen to have pleaded guilty in the case which broadly associates with Russian election meddling?
Well, that's a good question. And in this case, in this instance, I will fall back somewhat into generalities in that it remains to be seen whether and to what extent it will influence the Russia probe. There are so many other threads that are being tied together by Robert Mueller in terms of so many top Trump campaign officials or even administration officials pleading guilty to various crimes by now, that there's the possibility that even though she is guilty, that this will be only a minor matter in the grand scheme of things about whether and to what extent Russia has influenced U.S. elections and U.S. democracy. It could end up being significant if, in fact, money did flow, a significant amount of money did flow from Russia to the National Rifle Association and in turn to Donald Trump. And it's worth noting that in 2016, National Rifle Association came up with a massive amount of money, 3 times as much as it had in 2012, in support of the Republican nominee, that is Donald Trump. But at this point, we just don't know. We know that there was suspicious activity, suspicious links between this Russian gun advocacy group, which materialized kind of out of nowhere, which has been cultivating the NRA, and which included Ms. Butina, but whether it will lead to findings that of some broader conspiracy to influence the NRA and illegally funnel money to the Trump campaign, we don't know yet.
Right. So these are two sides of the story. Is she being punished because she's a Russian, or did she do something that broke the American law? The jury's still out on that one. Stephen Golub, thanks very much for joining us. And we have breaking news coming for you a day after the Sri Lankan top court ruled in favour of ousted Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. The new Prime Minister, the one that was installed by the President, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, has decided to resign. His son and lawmaker Namal Rajapaksa confirmed this move. And I'm quoting from his tweet now. To ensure stability of the nation, former President Rajapaksa has decided to resign from the premiership tomorrow. After an address to the nation, the SLPP with former President SLFP and others will now work to form a broader coalition with President Sirisena. An interesting turn of events there in Colombo. Joining us is Wion's correspondent Ashwin from the Sri Lankan capital. Ashwin, does this come on expected lines? Did anyone expect Rajapaksa to give up the fight after having stuck to his guns for so long?
No, not really, because a short while ago, the courts, of course, they extended the current embargo till January. And this, of course, was not expected for former President Mahinda Rajapaksa to resign. This after the court's decision this afternoon, the lawmakers from UPFA, along with Rajapaksa and President Sirisena, they met at the presidential secretariat and they had a lengthy discussion, it seems, and President Sirisena would have expected things to be more full, but unfortunately it did not turn out like that. So eventually, Mr. Rajapaksa's son, of course, he has tweeted, saying that his father would make a public statement in few hours' time, probably by morning tomorrow, and resign from the post that he claims that his father holds, the Prime Minister position of Sri Lanka.
It's interesting, and we'll have to choose our words very carefully because not many accepted him as Prime Minister, so resignation, I don't know if that fits or not. But having said that, what does it mean for the President, who's suffered one setback after the other, especially at the hands of the country's top courts? Has or has not Mr. Sirisena now lost the moral authority to continue in office?
With yesterday's decision coming out, President Sirisena is more or less should appoint a new Prime Minister. If President Sirisena doesn't appoint a new Prime Minister, accepting Mr. Wickremesinghe's resignation, which is yet to come.
Right. Ashwin, I'll request you to hold your thought. I'm sorry to have interrupted you. With us is Sulochana Ramaiah from Ceylon today, also on the phone line from Colombo. Sulochana, what do you make of this? Did you expect Mr. Rajapaksa to give up after having fought for so long? And what does it mean for Sri Lanka? Will normalcy return, or does this mean more chaos?
The decision is, of course, again, it is a well expected decision today also, because we knew from the beginning that this standoff is actually unlawful and it was unconstitutionally continuing for more than a month. So having the appeal filed against the interim order issued by the Court of Appeal impending Mahinda Rajapaksa and his government to run the functioning of as Prime Minister and Cabinet Minister took up today. And there was basically the Supreme Court refused to vacate the interim injunction issued by the Court of Appeal. case to be taken up again on the 16th and 17th and on the 18th of January. So now with this stepping down, actually, it is not a stepping down, actually, because he was basically told, not the Prime Minister, by the Speaker himself, about 3 times in the Parliament. And with all that, it continued to be in the same status quo with the President silent on the issue. But today, with this decision taken by the former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa,
right.
I think it ends well on a Friday, and this also began on a Friday on October 26th.
It did.
So we find it a very good conclusion, and the country will turn to normalcy from tomorrow onwards.
Hopefully. I remember it was a Friday when all of a sudden he was administered the oath of office. He's lost 2 trust votes in the Sri Lankan parliament and has now finally decided to resign. So Ranil Wickremesinghe has won this round. He remains the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka.